So, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us tonight for our third Connect Series panel in the 2015-2016 school year. My name is Raymond M. Griffin, and I will be facilitating this evening. I am a third-year doctoral student at Michigan State in the Educational Administration Department, K-12. I am the AERA Connect Series co-chair, along with my partner that you guys have met already, Carrie Gertner, on the ones and twos, who will be on the technical side tonight. We really appreciate her assistance in this production. Rounding out our team for the Division A Graduate Student Committee is Priya Leilande. She's our senior representative. Emma Bullock, the junior representative. Lindsay DiMartino, she is the UCEA Publishing Session Chair. Sarah Martin and Darius Stanley, Communications Co-Chairs. Latanya Dixon, Foster Polite Scholarship Chair. Lolita Tabron, Dialogic Forum Chair. And our lead reviewers and Foster Polite alumni are Craig Devato, Lee Flood, and Mary Krikorian. Division A largely supports an examination of sources and types of PK through 12 educational leadership, including school and district leaders and other formal and informal inside and outside of schools, and the effects of leadership on educational institutions and their staff, and their effects on student learning and other outcomes. And we are fervently committed to disseminating knowledge and to improving the capacity of the profession to enhance the public good. And so, what is this? This is the Connect Series. It's an initiative sponsored by the AERA Educational, the American Education Research Association, Division A, which is Leadership and Policy Graduate Student Committee. The Connect Series is a sequence of virtual real-time sessions on Google Hangout and YouTube on Monday evenings between September 2015, which was our first one, and May 2016. And each virtual session is focused on a unique theme, as is tonight, related to policy, organization, leadership practice, and preparations, and features a different set of panelists each time. And these panelists always are very, very, very diverse. They come from numerous backgrounds, combination of scholar practitioners, school and community leaders, and policy makers. Graduate students, educators, and other university faculty are also always welcome to join in the conversation. And now for the main event of tonight. Our session today is titled Leadership in Transnational and Transcultural Communities. This builds off of the UCEA, University Council for Educational Administration, theme of leadership within transnational and transcultural communities. And to briefly put this into context for our viewers and listening audience, transnational spaces largely reflect the external connections, so the social, geographic, economic, and political borders, so to speak, whereas your transcultural spaces reflect the internal connections among race, intersections of ethnicity, gender, religion, language, ability, and sexual orientation. And today, from our esteemed panelists, we hope to emphasize the multiple identities that shape leaders and the populations that they serve. So without further ado, let's meet them. Mrs. Sue Veenstra is an after-school director at the APA, American Preparatory Academy in West Valley City, Utah. APA is a public charter school district offering a rigorous classical liberal arts education to over 3,500 students in the Salt Lake County area. APA's West Valley campus, city campus, 2 campus, is a K-12 Title I public charter school. Approximately 75% of the students that attend there come from low-income homes, and 95% of the students are on free and reduced lunch. Most students graduating from this campus are also first-generation college. An interesting point to add about APA as well is within the last 2 years, or within 2 years, APA's after-school programs average 800 students a day and currently has over 21 after-school programs on their campuses. All of their after-school programs, K-12, are free to all of their students, and their motto is "We do what's best for kids." So thank you so much again for joining us, Ms. Veenstra.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Dr. Joe Wiemelt He is the director of bilingual and multicultural programs for Urbana School District in Urbana, Illinois. He oversees and leads the bilingual English as a second language, ESL, and migrant education programs in the district. He is a former bilingual and ESL teacher and has experience in teaching grades K through 8. Dr. Wiemelt also consults for various Illinois regional offices of education, where he provides professional development for districts and other organizations with ELL student populations. Thank you so much for being patient with us, brother. Dr. Wiemelt, we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Our last two panelists, Dr. Francisco Escobedo, he is the superintendent of Chula Vista Elementary School District in San Diego, California. His district is the largest elementary school district in California, with 44 schools serving approximately 27,000 students. He is also on the faculty of San Diego State and previously was a researcher at the American Institute of Research. We may also be joined by Assistant Principal Vargas. And I'm hoping that we will have them soon. They aren't on yet, but hopefully we'll have them soon. But let's get the conversation started, and we'll start with you, Dr. Wiemelt, as I know you've been sort of waiting, chopping at the bit to get to these questions. How have you seen your school community, or how is your school community transnational and transcultural? Please start with giving some specifics about that.
Sure. So in Urbana is located in central Illinois, east central Illinois, located within the community of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. The Urbana School District is a small, for the state of Illinois, a mid-sized district. We only serve about 4,000 students. Urbana and Champaign communities are what is kind of being considered a new growth immigrant and new growth Latino community in particular for the Midwest. And so over the past 10 years, we've seen dramatic increases in the number of students from first generation and now second generation immigrant homes. So speaking from the transnational perspective, as you mentioned before, we're seeing more and more students who are first, second, third generation immigrant youth, and we're seeing an increase in not only migrant farm workers, but also a variety of segments of different types of migrant workers and immigrant youth. We're also seeing growth with the recent unaccompanied minor situation from Central America. We're seeing a growth of secondary age students coming unaccompanied. And so we're going through a lot of shifts and changes there within how we serve students coming from different backgrounds and experiences. Within we're also seeing an increase in the number of historically African refugees from the Congo who are now rejoining family members, first generation immigrants. So we're seeing a growth in that community as well. So in terms of the transcultural piece, of course, we're seeing these intersections across language, race, documentation or citizenship status, and socioeconomic status as well. In addition to the demographics that I mentioned already, being basically on the campus of the University of Illinois, a major Research One international university, we also have a large segment of international students and families who also enroll in our district. So the diversity in terms of the intersectionality of our students within a traditional EL subgroup or within a traditional immigrant community is very vast and complex for a very small town. Urbana is only about 40,000 students, so it's kind of what we're seeing with specific demographic information.
Okay. Ms. Veenstra, did you want to pick up from there and tell us how your school community is transnational and transcultural?
Well, yes. Actually, we give priority enrollment to our refugee and outreach students. And so most of our students are refugees. We cater to a whole realm of different religions and parents who don't speak English, and most of it, 95% of our students are minorities. About 777 students About 800 of our students are Latino, so we have a huge Latino population. For Utah, that's huge.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, most of the population, 75% Caucasian, as opposed to our Caucasian population is about 5 to 10% here at our school. And so we pride ourselves with a lot of diversity. And with that, we have a lot of programs that are free for our students to learn English. And we do school uniforms to integrate and assimilate our students into, you know, um, our culture. Anything else?
Thank you, thank you, thank you for that.
I still have to see if I can contact remotely at least. If not,
Mr. Escobedo.
so what are you gonna do? You're gonna try to go home?
Yeah, I don't know if the traffic's gonna be.
It's gonna be not
I'm
as
not
bad,
sure if he's-
but if you wait another 10 minutes, it's gonna be ugly. Yeah. If I were you, I would go.
I'm not sure if he's with us. Carrie, if we can make
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know that he can hear us. I was trying to jump in there, but I couldn't. Let me see if I can just email him and let him know that we see him and hear him. I'll try to take care of it on my end, Ramon. Go ahead and continue.
Yeah, because he's on and live. Awesome. Ms. Veenstra,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a particular question about what that assimilation process may look like, and how is it sort of reproduced? Is it in honor of their cultures and heritage, the things that they're bringing to the table? And what does that look like on the school grounds? Because I know that you talked about uniforms being one of the mechanisms that you use to integrate students within that, within the culture.
Right.
But are there other ways that's being done?
We provide adult English classes for all of the parents who come. Most of our parents don't speak English. Parent involvement in education is really, really low. Parents actually put a complete trust in our teachers. So yes, with our teachers. So our culture is so integrated, and we have them do their homework here. The teachers are super supportive, but some students report, being physically disciplined from their parents because that's how they support our teachers in a way. So we create love and logic classes for our parents so that they know that doing physical discipline is not how we like treat our kids here. Also, how we assimilate our kids is not just through uniform, but we put extra emphasis on English. One, to assimilate the American culture, and then two, to avoid the creation of cliques and bullying, because we found that if we're not aggressive in creating extra emphasis on English, we get more problems between different groups within our school.
Okay. Yeah, so without that additional emphasis on English, you see more bullying and cliques and things of that nature, things that may damage the culture that you're trying to create at the school. Is that correct?
Right, and then uniforms. And then we also have character development classes, which include like social skills, like meet and greet. The entire school does character development classes, including the outreach students and refugee students, and that means like escorting their dance partner onto the floor, creating etiquette classes, and so that's one of the foundations that our school is built on, is character development for our entire school population.
Okay, awesome. And I would love to hear more about how that's done with the outreach students, as opposed to the other students that may be navigating those grounds. But let's hear from Dr. Wiemeld on what particular aspects of leadership support transnational and transcultural communities, and what have you seen in practice and or research, since you mentioned, you know, being on University of Illinois campus?
Sure. So to answer this question, I think I'm pulling from both my dissertation research, some research that I've done on leadership within transnational, transcultural communities, and my own practice here in my local context. What I've seen from the strongest leaders, the strongest aspects of leadership to support students really starts with acknowledgement and recognizing two things. One is the subtractive, very typically our school systems are very subtractive in nature, especially from a policy perspective. When we're thinking in terms of standardized curriculum and standardized testing and standardized policy making across the country, the way in which that impacts young, diverse, transcultural, transnational youth, it can become really marginalizing and really problematic, especially when you're talking about issues of language and the intersections with race and social class, among others. So the best leaders that I've seen are those who acknowledge that those policies are at play, and they work in ways to kind of shield their students in schools from those policies and kind of morph them into something that they can create that more matches what we know from educational leadership theory and literature, but also bilingual education. So I've seen a lot of my focus has been around fostering multilingualism, bilingualism, multiculturalism. So in contrast to the assimilation piece, we kind of view assimilation through the lens of affirming who our students are, what they bring with them, and adding to that. I believe in the idea of English plus. It's English plus the native language, not subtracting away from the native language or native culture that students bring. So I see, principals, leaders, school leaders building on the funds of knowledge, so to speak, from Gonzalez and Mull that the students bring to tap into what they already know, what they're already strong in, to build on the other areas where they need to develop, whether that's English, whether that's character development, as she mentioned as well. But within the school grounds, we can foster very responsive policies. We can foster very responsive practices as educators. But I do believe that it starts with bilingual education, in particular dual language immersion, building on culturally responsive curriculum, programming. Some of the best schools I've seen, in particular in Chicago, there's a school called Mecca Academy of Culture and Fine Arts and Language, and it's a dual language school that builds on culturally relevant curriculum, arts, fine arts, etc. And it does one of the best jobs I've seen of really capitalizing on the transnational and transcultural student body that they have. And so you literally hear from parents saying this is the best school for our children who may be growing up in the U.S. as young bilinguals, as young multicultural students who are kind of living on the borders, so to speak, from a transcultural perspective, as well as recent arrival immigrants or refugees as well. It capitalizes on the strengths of everybody from a language and culture perspective. And this notion, last point, is the notion of caring. Ofelia Garcia's work, among others, but in particular she builds on this idea of translanguaging and trans caring. So it's unique, specific ways to foster language development and to care for students that is specific to transcultural youth. So it's acknowledging the fact that students are developing as kind of these hybrid beings, and it fosters the space where they can develop into multicultural and multilingual students in the United States, instead of being subtractive settings that enforce English only in particular. So the leadership that I've seen there is really focused on that additive lens, that dynamic lens, as moving away from the subtractive lens.
I think that's very well stated. What have you seen particularly when you mentioned the Mecca School in Chicago, right? And you mentioned this ideology of more of this, just schools being very subtractive in nature, and just personal experience and being an administrator in schools, what I've seen in terms of assimilation is exactly that. It isn't adding on to the things that they already know, the knowledges, perspectives, the values, the heritage, the cultures that they bring to the table. It's pretty much stripping them of them, of those particular assets, and having them assimilate to what they believe is the correct way to do things. So having stated that, have you or anybody else that you know, other leaders, because you mentioned strong leaders a lot, taken any of the practices from the Mecca school and maybe implemented them within Urbana schools?
Sure. Actually, that's a great point. Well, some of the things I've seen and with my colleagues, so I've become close colleagues with the principal at Cal Mecca Academy, Francis Garcia, and one of the things I noticed that was very strong was the way in which she engaged families, and the way the school engaged families in the school, and it was through art and through multicultural activities and events, and not just you're celebrating diversity, but really embedding their beliefs and their practices and the cultural differences that parents bring into the school day from a not just a curriculum lens but a leadership lens. So parents are running grocery stores in the school. Parents are fostering folkloric dance classes in the school or during their after-school programs. So we've actually capitalized on a lot of that, learned from them in Chicago, and we're starting some of those same things. So we're trying to acquire ways to engage families in meaningful ways into the school, in leadership, and not your traditional, I'm going to sit on the school improvement team leadership, but I'm going to be an active member of this community and highlight the things I do well. Some of that is through cultural events, but some of it is through just the day-to-day interaction of parent volunteers in the lunchroom, those sorts of things. So family engagement can look different based on the context. And so we're really trying to build on what we've seen at that other school around culturally relevant arts as fine arts and elective classes to really build on that notion of transcultural. Being transcultural is you can assimilate while maintaining who you are and what you bring to school, while gaining the additional piece. So those are some of the things we're trying to incorporate, as well as the dual language immersion model that Cal Mecca does really well. We have done similar work in Urbana, and so it's very exciting to see that take off.
Awesome. Ms. Veenstra, if I can get you to chime in here on any of the things that were just said regarding just the assimilation practices, and I also wanted to come back to you regarding something that you mentioned earlier about the outreach students and the character development classes and all of the things that, can you just speak to the populations of students that participate in the after-school programs, and then what the programs actually do for students and families, and how they integrate their cultures, their values into those particular courses or models to uphold and preserve who they are.
Okay. We don't necessarily tell our students to abandon their culture or anything like that, but to understand our, and navigate American culture as well. Students, some of the programs are catered mostly to everyone. So we don't have a specific, our motto is not to only have a specific club for maybe Polynesians, because we are not experts at the Polynesian culture, that we create a private environment for that, because we're not experts in that field. So what we do is we create study halls. We have about 200 kids each week that come to study hall. We also have bilingual mentors that come to teach our students. We also have programs, a huge music program. So because we are a liberal arts, classical art facility, we focus a lot on music. Our music program includes anyone that wants to learn music. So our K-6 program has about 200 kids. The music program's 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. And it includes music theory, music training, and we do a lot of research on music and the brain. Also, we do a lot of STEM programs for our kids. even knitting and yoga, and a wide variety of
Yeah.
selections that incorporate pretty much any student that wants to learn.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I absolutely love the motto of your schools. We do
Okay.
what's best for kids.
Can't hear anything.
That's phenomenal.
Yes, we do what's best for kids. We always go back to that motto. If we never say no, and we always find a way to make it happen. So,
Awesome.
yep, right now we hired like several social workers and parent liaisons to work with the staff in getting kids resources and the funding that they need, even to the extent of transportation. Transportation is a huge thing. Because we are a public school, we have a open enrollment, so a lot of our kids, they travel about 2 hours to attend our school.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and so it's a classical education that parents find rewarding.
About how many of your students would you say travel 2 hours to get to school every day?
Probably about like 5%.
5%.
We have 5 school districts here in the Salt Lake Valley, and 2 of them are in West Valley, which are the low-income part of the Utah in Salt Lake City, and most of our parents work 2 jobs, and yeah, and this is a great opportunity for them.
Hmm.
So having 3 hours of free violin lessons, homework classes, and performance classes is a big thing for them.
Definitely, definitely. And this starts at what, about 2 p.m. or?
So our school days actually are a little bit longer. They start at 8 a.m. They end at 3:10 p.m.
Okay.
From 3:10 we have extended day, which means that the kids get extra reps and extra lessons with their teacher if they need it. And then about 3:30 they start their after-school programs till 6:30.
Gotcha. Phenomenal, phenomenal stuff. Do we have Mr. Escobedo, Superintendent Escobedo, on the line yet? I can see his face. Not sure if he can hear us.
Yes, he is here, and he cannot hear us, though.
Okay.
We're trying to look at if his headphones or speakers are plugged into the mic jack on his computer or something, but he does not have sound right now. So but we can hear him.
Okay. We can hear him?
So do you want to type a question to him?
Sure.
Well, here, go ahead. You narrate and I'll type.
I'm going to go ahead and ask Dr. Wiemelt this question. He can chime in on the next one.
Okay.
In Urbana, Dr. Wiemelt, in what ways have you seen, or in what ways have you supported the advocacy of communities or within communities marginalized by the research or policy paradigms that you mentioned before?
Yeah. Some of the things I've been thinking about most recently with refugee youth and unaccompanied minor youth who need a lot of social, emotional support and just social service support as they kind of manage this new setting that they're in. So we actually have been partnering with our local Champaign-Urbana Immigration Forum, which is a forum of community members and immigration attorneys that are working in providing ongoing support to the schools as well as ongoing support to parents. We do a lot of collaboration with our parent liaisons to provide kind of social services, workshops, fundraising, consulate visits when either the Mexican or Guatemalan consulates are able to come. We host them, and these just ongoing workshops for parents and students. But I also think this idea of fostering educational programming during the day that is linguistically appropriate and linguistically responsive. So as most, if not all of our students that fall into to transcultural, transnational sort of communities are provided the opportunity to be in bilingual programming, or at a bare minimum ESL certified teachers and we provide a lot of native language support for the families and for the children. So this advocacy piece within the communities is with school-based, but it's also community-based, and trying to open up the school more to a community center for these families and children, as opposed to just a place to go from 8 to 3. Building on what Sue does in Utah in terms of the after-school program that we provide, and we provide lots of ongoing workshops for families just around their rights as and health clinics, dental clinics, all these sorts of things that go beyond the scope of the 8 to 3 day, which is necessary if we're really talking about advocacy work for marginalized communities. A lot of times these students come and families come, and they're just not sure where to go to navigate the system. And so it's our job, it's our responsibility to help foster that space where we can navigate it with them. So there's also lots of Illinois advisory boards. So Illinois has a state bilingual advisory board and immigrant advisory board.
No, I'm not. I'm using Safari. That may be the issue. Let me try to go on to
we can hear you.
Chrome then.
So yeah, so those are just some of the ways in which to support the advocacy work. I think at the heart of it is ongoing professional development with teachers and just educators in general about the transcultural piece in particular, as well as transnational, but transculturally speaking, students who are marginalized in a variety of different ways in traditional school settings, and trying to find ways to advocate and foster the space where we build on what they bring to school, and kind of challenge the systemic inequities that oftentimes persist in schools. So the PD, the ongoing professional development in our schools, is an ongoing challenge and work, because most of our teachers are not immigrant. They didn't grow up with children. They weren't children of immigrants. They don't understand the transcultural or the transnational community firsthand. So it's the ongoing advocacy and work with them to better understand who their students are, which is an important piece.
And Ms. Veenstra, what does that type of dynamic look like at APA in terms of the teacher makeup as it relates to the populations that you serve? Do you have teachers who were once immigrants, or do they have teachers that look like some of the students there?
Unfortunately, the teacher, the racial makeup of our teachers here are mostly white, are mostly Caucasian. There's very few minorities or like first generation college students or teachers that are here, unfortunately.
And Raymond, something that to build on that is that's the, you know, we know that's the reality primarily across the country, unfortunately. So some things that we're trying to do more of is we've increased our candidate pool, our teachers pool of faculty of color and faculty of immigrant backgrounds in particular as well, through Grow Our Own programming. And so we're providing funding to help grow our own teachers, starting with students at the high school level to stay in the community and become teachers as well as folks who are working in the schools in paraprofessional roles that are quality candidates that reflect our student body. And we're trying to provide ways to support them to continue to going to school to become teachers in our district. And we've seen about a 6% increase in the past 2 years of staff, of Latino staff in particular, who are of immigrant backgrounds or second-generation immigrants. So that program is helping, and it's creating this better connection between teacher and student, and kind of community building within the staff to more closely match our student body. We're not where we need to be yet, but that's kind of the initiative we're starting.
Right, and some of the things that we are implementing is our after-school programs. About like 90% of our after-school staff they are immigrant mentors from colleges that are current college students that are first generation college students that are mentoring our students right now. So a lot of them are first generation college students that are mentoring our kids. So, thank you.
Okay, I want to get Mr. Escobedo in here really quickly. You can speak now.
Do you wanna go ahead and pose the question so that the viewers can hear it?
Oh, well, I already posed it.
Oh, you already asked it. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's ready.
All right, here we go.
Okay. I guess the question was, how do I connect with populations that are typically marginalized in my community? Well, my district serves a community that typically is marginalized. Chula Vista Elementary School District resides about 5 miles from the border of Mexico. So it is a continual strategy for us, obviously, to connect with our community. We do have a promised neighborhood in one of our school settings, so we utilize many of the research techniques like utilizing promotoras, which are parents that connect with our parents from cradle to college. We have what we call Universidad de Padres, which is a parenting class that actually starts at birth, and we have parent advocates that we connect with our parents to ensure that there is that continual support structure with populations that are in great need. And so we also have an amazing partnership with many of our social services, such as the South Bay Community Services. We have an interesting, how could I say, preschool, which is a focus on students that have received trauma at an early age. These are students that are referred by the police department and by the Child Protective Services. These are kids that need some specific assistance in overcoming the trauma scars that they've received at a very young age. So we really do a lot of work with students that typically or populations that are marginalized. A big push this year is our foster youth population. If you look at, these are the kids that typically are invisible and fall through the cracks. And so we've assigned a regional approach with our social workers on ensuring that they receive a real individual focus on helping students that are typically have high mobility, a lack of belonging to a certain structure, and we try to minimize their movement and try to connect them as much as we can. Is there any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, of course. We're definitely lucky to have you, and thank you so much for joining us again, Superintendent Escobedo. So we've been talking about this idea of assimilation and integration with communities who are typically at the margins, and we've been thinking about that from many different perspectives and contexts. And so I would like to ask, how would you consider, or how do you think that the Chula Vista School District, what are you guys doing to sort of foster cross-cultural negotiation and engagement within your schools with the families that you serve? I'm not sure if he's there.
Well, I don't think he can hear us still, right?
No, he can't. I typed it into Hangouts for him. He's reading it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the question, I believe, is talking about the idea of assimilation with marginalized communities, and how is Chula Vista responding to it? Wow, that's a great question. In my community, it's a very binational community, which what I mean by that is the constant movement among the border is at a high rate. We have about a 25 to 30% mobility rate across the border. So the assimilation is very unique. We have 45 schools. We're the largest elementary school district in the state of California, so it's quite a large number of students that go through our buildings. But one of the things that we do to help with the assimilation purposes is we have about 19 of our schools are dual immersion schools, which means we teach both languages, but it's not just the language that we teach, but we teach the culture as well. So it's a 90-10 or 50-50 model from kinder all the way to middle school. What that means is that both languages are being taught, and then history is explicitly taught in Spanish throughout their educational careers. And the class composition is unique too, because we have about a third of the students are Spanish speakers only. Another third of the students are bilingual students, and then the other third are English only students. So we have one of the largest Japanese populations, Filipino populations, and about 20-25% are Anglo as well. So we have a real diverse population, yet they are in these dual immersion classes learning the Hispanic culture as well as the English culture. So it's a really nice way not only to assimilate, I believe, with the culture at large, but also for the other cultures to understand the Hispanic culture. So it's really a beautiful thing to see and watch, and you see how the kids progress. We have been so successful that by the time our students are freshmen, they're scoring a 5 in their AP exam, not only in Spanish, but in history as well. So it's something that we take great pride in finding ways to ensure that assimilation aspect is purposely integrated in our curriculum.
Thank you. For Dr.
Yes, I agree with you, Joseph. Dual immersion is a key systemic way to foster the space. You're absolutely right. Thank you.
The powers that be. I love it. Dr. Wemel, did you want to expand on anything that he stated for our listening audience, because he can see it, but we can't hear.
Yeah. While Dr. Escobedo was talking, I wholeheartedly agree with a lot of things that he was saying. But the dual language immersion, the 2A immersion program and model is a key systematic way to foster the kind of space that we want for cross-cultural negotiation and bilingualism, dynamic bilingualism, additive bilingualism, and academic success. As he mentioned, his high schoolers are doing well on AP exams. Oftentimes they go through these kind of developmental additive programs. And this goes back to the school, Calmeca School in Chicago, and the schools that we're fostering in Urbana around Spanish, and also now French and Mandarin. We're seeing growing numbers of French Lingala speakers from the Congo and Africa, and we're seeing such growth that we're starting the conversation about the possibility of starting dual language immersion in French. And so this cross-cultural development of students, not only in Spain, but across immigrant communities, transnational communities. So it is, we know from a research stance, it's the best way to educate students when you have the ability to. It's the best way to foster multilingualism, multiculturalism, this cross-cultural development. We just don't do it enough across the country, and that gets back to kind of the systemic inequities of policy that oftentimes handcuffs us, or just not having the student makeup to do it. Right? If you're in a very multilingual student body, like Sue was talking about, it's hard to do dual language immersion when you have a variety of languages. But that key idea of fostering this multilingual hybrid sort of binational student is key. So.
And I totally agree with you, Joseph, because when Utah has a 1% African American census, and then also like 75% of the population is Caucasian, it is hard to find those bilingual and teachers. So I think that's one of the biggest problems that we face is finding the diversity in teachers here in Utah.
And I would say to add, sorry, Raymond, if that's okay, I would say even within states like California and Illinois that have a lot of history of immigrant communities and multiracial communities across the states, we've done such a poor job historically in developing bilingualism in our students that we oftentimes have a lot of Latino adults or bilingual adults who didn't go through a dual language program. So to be able to teach in a bilingual school, Kathy Escamilla talks about this, is that the reason why we have such a shortage right now is because of the failures of policy in the 80s. And so it's this common, we struggle I'm sure in California, we definitely struggle in Illinois to have enough bilingual and teachers of color, and that's a systemic sort of result of miseducation of a lot of youth historically. So we got to get it right now. We got to get it right today.
If I can add, one of the things that we've done is, I think the partnerships with higher ed is critical. And some of our principals and our teachers have our professors for San Diego State, and they help with the whole promoting, getting, really emphasizing that bilingual, binational type of credentialing system, and they get a lot of the theory and practice at our schools, which really has been amazing. One of the things that we're doing as well, since 2000, we have a Compact for Success with our university, which means students that come from our area, if they get a certain grade point average, they're automatically accepted to the university.
Oh.
And if they get a teaching credential, they will have priority to be teachers here at our district. So we really want to create a pipeline, right? And I think that's one of the failures, is that we see our organization as an entity. Middle school sees their organization as an entity, and high school, and then higher ed, and then you have career and college, right?
Yeah.
We want to link everything together as much as we can, and want to create pathways to ensure that there's a seamless structure from birth to college and career. And we're beginning to piece it together, and I think in a few years we'll be receiving a lot of dividends. We're seeing a lot of dividends already in many of our classes who actually entered San Diego State. But to respond to that teacher shortage, I believe restructuring these traditional pipelines have to occur.
Awesome. And to round everything out tonight, Ms. Veenstra, I wanted to just ask you, and then I also ask Dr. Wiimote and Mr. and Superintendent Escobedo to finish us off here. How do you think current and inspiring leaders, I know you spoke to this a little bit, Dr. Wiimote, earlier, how do current and inspiring leaders prepare for leadership in transnational and transcultural spaces, and what tools or insight would you suggest?
Tools for leadership. So all of our leaders, APA teachers and everything, are trained actually to treat all students with dignity and respect. As we become aware of all of these issues, they're all addressed in very systemized, regular matter, including regular communications, staff meetings, which includes, including our stakeholders, our our coordinators, our outreach coordinators, our staff, our counselors, our school support team. So including everybody in this conversation is critical, and that's a big part of like getting all of our, having a good like professional development, and staff is to making sure that they're aware of these issues, so, and they become part of them and involved. So
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say, some of the stuff that I've thought a lot about as a practitioner, but also in my dissertation work, this is kind of my implication section, right? Of how do you prepare leaders, or what does it mean to be a critical leader or equity-oriented leader in bilingual education or transnational, transcultural communities? And it really does have to start with acknowledging that the status quo, the typical preparation is not enough. The typical leadership preparation is not sufficient to lead for social justice and to lead for systemic change in a complex school systems and school systems that are continuing to change. I don't say changing anymore because they've been changing for a long time, but I think it really builds on advocacy work. It builds on coalition building, building a strong team of folks in your district. One of the strongest things about Calmecca Academy is their school-wide leadership. That teachers, it's not just the principal who's the leader. It's teachers, it's parents, it's the community. It's a coalition of people fighting this fight, so to speak, and fostering this space for their students to succeed. And at the bare minimum, principals need to have, in my opinion, bilingual education endorsements, the same endorsements that bilingual ed or ESL teachers need to teach. I think the principals need to get it if you're working in a transcultural, transnational school setting, because you have to have it be a strong instructional leader within the lens of bilingual education to be a strong instructional leader for transnational youth. And so it builds on traditional preparation with equity-oriented thinking and learning and reading and anti-racist work and pro-racial justice, but then within the intersectionality of immigrant communities and language development is necessary. It's got to all come together to be the ideal leader in a transcultural community.
And I would have to, say that is true. It's really a constant awareness factor, but I think it's really important that beyond the professional development opportunities that we have to figure out what are those metrics out there to measure how sensitive we are with the clients that we work with. And so every year, part of my principal evaluation is I look at very closely at the customer surveys, meaning how do parents view the principal in being welcoming, in allowing them to make decisions in the school. So I think as an organization, creating structures that allow you to hear the voice of your community and how they feel they're either being empowered or disempowered is crucial. So that is one of the standards that we have explicitly for our principals, and they're evaluated and they reflect on the results of those surveys. So I think it's really critical that you have to marry some type of metric with greater awareness through professional development.
Yeah, I think that metric piece, like 10-second response. That metric piece is so important, because I think what happens a lot of times is we're so used to in education measuring the success of a school by a standardized test score, right. And a standardized test score is not the metric to use to determine the success of a transnational, transcultural school community. There's so many other factors, like Dr. Escobedo said, that need to go into that, and it's kind of reshaping the way in which we hold schools accountable. Accountability measures for bilingual communities is important. So, thank you.
And Dr. Escobedo really, really loved the slogan "Imagination, Intellect, and Inquiry." I found to equal success. I found that pretty fascinating and actually very encouraging for my own work, and it's something that I'll definitely use. And so just sort of wrapping things up and thinking about a few of the things that, have been stated. One just stated by Dr. Escobedo is, how leadership can just ask the question of, how sensitive are we to the students and families that we serve, to their particular issues. Um, Asking and thinking about typical leadership is something that definitely needs to be restructured when thinking about students from transcultural and transnational spaces, and just school-wide leadership and equity-oriented thinking. Those types of things, were mentioned. The assimilation and integration processes with valuing the perspectives, knowledges, heritage, the culture, the values, and everything that sensitive intersectionality that these students and families bring to the table. Are they appreciated? Are they valued? And how are they preserved? For their own good. I love what is going on with San Diego State in terms of the grade point average, sort of yielding another pipeline for students to not only be successful, but to also come back into the teaching profession and what's going on in Utah. With Miss Veenstra and just the phenomenal work that you're doing there, and also Dr. Wemo in Urbana schools, and adopting some of the policies that are going on in Chicago to make the lives in the communities, because we spoke a lot about advocacy tonight, better with the youth and the families that sort of navigate these spaces. And so, just for the folks who are listening, transnational spaces largely reflect the interconnected external dimensions that sort of traverse social, geographic, economic, and political borders, juxtaposed with transcultural spaces, traditionally compromised or comprised of the internal connections of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, language, ability, or sexual orientation, and many others. But by acknowledging these interconnected spaces, we accept the multiple ways of knowing and being able to create in what Anzo Dua in 1987 called a critical place for cross-cultural negotiation and engagement, something that we spoke on here, and what that process looked like, and this idea of bilingualism being the way to do that. And this negotiation, in a sense, fosters the empathy that leaders need as a political act, and challenges us, mostly as critical educators, to sort of take on multiple lenses and perspectives, responsibilities in our teaching, service, scholarship, and most of all, our leadership. We just heard from 3 powerful leaders who are doing work in a very robust and comprehensive manner, and we thank them so much for joining us tonight and allowing us to experience how they are tackling these critical issues as it relates to educating the diverse populations that they are educating every single day. And we really do commend your work and sincerely appreciate your efforts, Dr. Escobedo, Ms. Sue Veenstra, and Dr. Wemo. We truly do thank you from the bottom of our hearts, AERA Division AGR or GSC. And so please save these dates for future productions as we sign off. Monday, March 21st, 2016, we'll be hosting Queer Leadership. Live broadcast of AERA Fireside Chat, April 7th through the 10th, Politics, Empowering Community Policy and Schooling. More info to come on that. And then lastly, Monday, May the 9th, 2016, we'll be hosting our last Connect series of the year, Remembering Rural Schools. Thank you guys again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thanks for the
Good night, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll be sending the correspondence out soon. Thanks again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye. You too.